have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we are thrilled to have as our guest at the top of the show, legendary writer and artist Alison Bechdel, who is going to tell us about her new book that has just come out and with great reviews.
Really great. A real treat to talk to Alison. And after that, we'll do the news. President Biden, in his speech to Congress, pledged to protect transgender Americans.
Caitlyn Jenner came out against trans girls in sports this week, now that she's running for governor, a position that reverses the one she took a year ago.
And there's more vicious anti-trans legislation advancing in Tennessee, Florida, West Virginia, and Alabama. But we're going to be challenging all of those in court.
We have 2 more murders to report of transgender women of color.
Terrible. But on the better side, a lesbian couple in Ohio have been elected prom king and queen at their high school.
We mourn Olympia Dukakis, who shone in transgender and lesbian roles.
And in international news, a horrible story from Latvia, the murder of a gay activist in Tonga, hope for justice for trans people in Honduras, and a huge lesbian march in Paris.
But we now welcome our guest, Alison Bechdel. Hello. Come in.
There.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Ann.
Hey.
So happy to be here with you.
We're happy to have you here, Alison. Thank you.
Let me just do a brief introduction. We all know you from the comic strip that you wrote, Dykes to Watch Out for 25 years. And by the way, we didn't plan this, but this is National Cartoonist Day. Did you know that?
I just learned that. Yes, that's cool.
Okay. And of course, the last time we had you on was for your graphic novel or graphic memoir, Fun Home, which was turned into a Tony Award-winning musical on Broadway, my favorite show of that season and many other seasons. Your latest book is The Secret to Superhuman Strength, offering your reflections on self-improvement, death, and a lifelong obsession with physical fitness in what the United Kingdom's Guardian called an astonishing book. Welcome.
Thank you.
It is an astonishing book. It's a serious book, but it started out, you started wanting to write a lighter book. So talk to us about the transformation along the way and the 8 years you spent writing this.
Yeah, after doing those 2 family memoirs, first Fun Home about my father, which I followed with another one about my mother, very intense, difficult books to write that took a lot of time. I felt like I wanted to do something that might be more fun and might go more quickly. so I
do, yeah.
I had this idea to write about my exercise life, which is always something that's been very fun for me. Like the one part of my life that is not riddled with conflict and ambivalence. But as soon as I embarked on the project, it became sort of much darker and more complicated because I realized I couldn't really write about these things like skiing and biking and running, these things that are so much fun without really looking at the fact that I'm getting older. I'm not going to be able to do these things forever. In fact, even now I'm getting slower and weaker. So it became a sort of look at bigger questions, at mortality, at what is the meaning of our existence here, and how do we make the most of it? It also became a look at how to become less self-centered. I feel like I've been engaged in this project over the course of my life and trying to get out of my self-obsessed, neurotic, everyday mind and just be more open, more connected to other people, more in the world. So it's about that too.
And of course, you are connected to lots of other people, not just the Dykes to Watch Out For that you wrote all those years, but your spouse, Holly Ray Taylor, collaborated with you on this, doing on the color work. You're in color this time.
Yes. This was an interesting way that one of the themes of my book actually became borne out in the physical book itself. I'm trying to explore the way that, let me just say that the title, The Secret to Superhuman Strength, comes from my childhood fixation with those Muscle Man ads in the comic books. And that became later in life a kind of fantasy of self-sufficiency. Like I wanted to just be so tough that I didn't need other people. And I'm trying to unlearn this lesson. I'm trying to embrace my interdependence with others. And that came to the fore with the book itself when I didn't have time to do all the difficult work of coloring it on my own. And my partner, Holly, who's an artist, was able to step in and work with me. And I've never collaborated because I tend to be a control freak. I like to do everything myself. So that was a bit of a change for me, but it worked out really well. And
yes, put that picture back, Rich. That is a picture Alison has drawn of herself. Tell us what that is. What position have you achieved there?
Oh, this is the sleeping tortoise. When I was in my 30s, I was doing a lot of yoga, and I was also having a lot of relationship problems. And at a certain point, I took a vow of celibacy, and it was right about the same time that I became able to do this pose, which it's like completely turned in on myself, completely looking away from the world.
Wow.
Well, I can't help but feel that you retain some ambivalence about connection with the world. Am I wrong about that?
No, that's true. I mean, it's a process. I feel like this is going to just always be one of my issues. I tend to be kind of an isolated person. I mean, here I am talking to you from Vermont.
I mean, also you were. Go ahead.
Well, as a New Englander myself, a native of Connecticut and resident of Massachusetts for many years, I can appreciate the New England as a locus, but I don't think that isolation is necessarily unique. And I felt as I read the book, and maybe this is a reflection of me too, that what you identify in talking about the blissful absorption in your own creativity and the lure of physical invincibility and all of this struggle with connection is actually a reflection of the larger human condition and not so rare. And I wonder whether that isn't what you're writing about here.
Yes. I mean, I'm a total progressive. I'm a lesbian. I'm a feminist. I understand that we are interdependent. I understand that, we're in this for the common good. That's what I believe. But I still have this sort of, regressive strain in myself that thinks I'm the Marlboro man, and I think that's a very typical American mindset. Even, obviously for red state Republicans, that's the definition of that perspective. But I think even people who want to live communally still get annoyed by other people, I guess.
You touch one of the joys of reading the book is you take us through all the decades from the 60s to today and reflect on a lot of cultural phenomena, political phenomenon. You list a lot of pop figures from Captain Kangaroo, who you thought was married to Mr. Green Jeans.
I did.
But also leading poets and writers from our time, like Adrienne Rich, and then you go to Wordsworth, Coleridge, Emerson, and most particularly Margaret Fuller from the early 19th century becomes a key figure. How do they all fit into your story? I always like to sort of flesh out my
memoir work with other people's writing. I just feel like I like that resonance, and it helps me to figure out how I feel about the things I'm writing about. And I love this sort of lineage of writers from the British Romantics, Coleridge and Wordsworth and Dorothy Wordsworth, through to the American Transcendentalists, people who really loved nature, saw the divine in nature, spent a lot of time in nature, walking and then writing about it. It very directly inspired their work. And I just was interested in their ideas and in the way that those ideas carry forward in time to like the writing of Jack Kerouac, who I also include in the book. Not as a feminist, I'm not a huge Kerouac fan, but I always loved his book, The Dharma Bums, for the wonderful writing about exploring the Sierras and the Cascades in the 50s, before people really did that. And of course, The Dharma Bums and On the Road became big books for the 60s generation. So there's this whole kind of countercultural lineage that I was interested in including in my story.
You say that I'm sorry, where was I? Oh, that you tried to write light, but realized there's no point in writing a book unless you're doing it to figure something out. And I wonder about the experience of actually writing it and whether it was, it felt like a project to write a book, or whether it was more of an exercise in figuring yourself out.
It was the latter. I mean, that's really why I do what I do. I don't know how to just write a book, like to come up with a thesis and then write it. It's really kind of an immersive, organic project for me of just evolving through it and figuring out where I want to go as I'm writing, as I'm going there. And so this book, I wanted to make something happen. I wanted to find a way to get back to a kind of earlier freedom with my own creativity, and it wasn't happening. I felt very stuck for a long time. I was researching and writing, but I wasn't actually drawing, and it was a difficult project. But at a certain point, I did have a breakthrough, and it all started to come together, fortunately, in time to make my deadline.
Well, I think maybe the reason that Fun Home is so resonant, and it really was. I've read the book many times. I've seen all the play in its earliest workshop and then its next couple of incarnations, and it just is so profound and so moving and so thrilling in its depth and the way it touches the audience. And I think that comes from the depth of your thinking and your sharing of your process.
Well, thank you. Sometimes I worry that I share a bit too much.
No.
I really divulge a lot about my personal life. I don't know why, but I seem compelled to do that.
Well, of course, people, I think, appreciate your honesty. I mean, you win a MacArthur grant and you say you feel like a fraud for it. And when you get awards, you say you feel depleted and foolish. And I think many of us go through that when, people are given accolades. I mean, certainly not the narcissists, but normal people.
Yeah. I felt even a little self-indulgent writing about that at all, but I'm glad you picked up on that.
Oh, and by the way, on Fun Home, Jake Gyllenhaal got the rights to it and was going to make a movie of it and play your late father. Is that still in the works?
As far as I know, I think somehow that information got leaked prematurely before it was really happening, but it is happening. It's just not actually happening yet.
Well, on the lighter side, my favorite accolade you received recently was the New York Times crossword puzzle, where the clue was like many characters in Alison Bechdel cartoons, and the
Wasn't
answer
that awesome? All I can think
the answer was lesbian.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And you guys, all I could think of was, remember when the New York Times wouldn't even print the word lesbian?
Or gay.
Or gay.
It always had to be homosexual. So that felt like that was a triumph.
avowed homosexuals.
Right.
I wondered whether that was the first time lesbian had showed up in a New York Times crossword puzzle, but I haven't researched that yet. The other thing that you often get known for is the Bechdel test in movies, or maybe other realms too, where they're judged on whether there's more than one woman as a real character and talking to each other and not about men. You're a cultural phenomenon.
I know, that's so funny. It's from a cartoon I wrote in 1985, just this kind of little lesbian joke that my friends and I had. And it somehow, like, finally 40 years later, the mainstream culture has kind of caught up with it. So that's exciting.
Big time. It gets referenced all the time in all sorts of places. Weird. Yeah, but cool. Now, you wrote Dykes to Watch Out For 25 years and stopped, moved on from that, or said you had no problem moving on. But you revived it some during the Trump years. What was that about, and how did that go?
Yeah, I was done with that comic strip after 25 years. It had been a lot of work just keeping up with it and all those constant deadlines. And the second Bush administration kind of just wore me out. So I was happy to move on to other projects. And for the whole Obama administration, I didn't really think about those characters. But when Trump was elected, my first thought, well, after whether I should move to Sweden, my next thought was, I got to write about this with my characters. What are my characters doing? How are they feeling about this? And I revived them all. You know, it was 8 years later. They're all 8 years older, a lot more wrinkles and gray hair. And it was very soothing to get to, imagine how they were dealing with that moment. And I did a few episodes during the Trump years with the characters.
I mean, you conclude in the book, I'm not trying to give away the punchline, but that you seek transcendence and you talk about transcendentalism, but you conclude that the only thing to transcend is the idea that there is something to transcend. Yeah,
I feel like where I ended in the book was the fact that this is it. This is our life. This is our world. This is our chance to do something. There's seeking transcendence to some other plane is a kind of avoidance. Like, if you're going to make a change, do it here and do it now.
And with all the thinking that you've done about this, and we're all trying to do it because we're in a lot of trouble as a country, as a world, what do you think we should be devoting ourselves to, or yourself to save us?
I mean, I feel very almost immobilized with my anxiety about the planet, about climate change. Everything else is also in kind of dire straits. But if we can't live here, that's the worst. That's the worst case scenario. I don't have any wisdom. I just think we've got to all do something, to stem this. See, I'm hysterical. I can't even put it into words. We've got to make big changes. Stop traveling all over the planet. Stop eating meat. Do all the little things we know will make a difference. Just do them. But more important, I feel like I don't want to be in denial about it. I think that it's so painful, the reality of what's happening, that we just tune it out. And there's still so much beauty in the world, so much magic that we're not able to see if we're in denial. So I feel like I'm working at allowing myself to feel my grief about what's happening to the climate, to just feel that, which opens me up to all the things that are still good and makes me more devoted to saving them. That's the idea.
Okay.
And what do you want readers to get out of this particular book at this particular time?
I hope that other people might relate to this, my struggle to get out of my own way. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And at least I can be a companion to them on that journey.
Well, that's certainly the way the book worked for me. I mean, going page to page, not knowing what to expect, starting out thinking it was just going to be, an exploration of physical exercise. And it really got into so many different things. And it really made me read very closely and look up a lot of things on Google.
And it made me read it twice because there's so much in it, and it is so deep that it really required me to take a second look at it to slow down and ponder.
I think this one would be a serious play rather than a musical, though.
Yes.
I don't know. You never can tell. I think there's a lot of room for dance numbers there.
Yeah. You guys, thank you so much. It's been really fun talking with you both.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Alison. Good luck with the book. Congratulations. And we'll see you sometime soon.
Thank you.
Great. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Wow.
It really is such a profound book. And it feels almost, I don't want to say sacrilegious, but it's hard to have a light conversation about it when it is a deeply moving and thought-provoking book.
Even though there is a lot of wit in it.
Always in Alison's work.
Not just with the words, but with the drawing. And it does bear rereading because you don't quite know where it's going all the time. But then when you come back to it, you can read it again. Okay.
Here it is, The Secret to Superhuman Strength, Alison Bechdel. Wonderful, wonderful, thought-provoking book.
Okay. Into the news. Well, just as when we finished up last week, the president spoke to Congress, and he called for passage of the Equality Act, which isn't going anywhere in the Senate. And he said, to all transgender Americans watching at home, especially the young people who are so brave, I want you to know your president has your back. That was a nice thing to hear. And we're also hearing from the White House now that they are planning on getting involved in fighting a lot of these anti-trans bills in the states, however they can do that with their various departments. And the Department of Justice is looking at, and I hope they will, get involved in the legal cases fighting them.
Yeah, HRC is talking to them about this and strategizing. And I think DOJ will get involved in filing briefs in these cases around the country, in supporting, say, the use of the Bostock decision to overturn these state laws that are clearly a mess. So I'm hopeful about that. I also was happy to see that one of Jill Biden's guests at the president's speech was a trans teen, Stella Keating. She was one of those who testified in Congress, I think, about the Equality Act. And the guests were virtual for this speech, but Stella Keating was one of them. That was nice.
But the news from the states remains bad, especially in the South. In Alabama, Lambda Legal. Well, first let me give you the bad news, then we'll show you the picture. Lambda Legal, the ACLU, and the ACLU of Alabama have announced their plans to challenge the new law, which criminalizes medical professionals who provide gender-affirming care to trans youth with up to 10 years in prison. And the closeted governor there, Kay Ivey, signed the bill. Parents and guardians who support their trans kids are also subject to criminal penalties under this new law.
Let's be clear about what this is doing. This is depriving people of medical care. Imagine if they targeted any other population in the country to say, cancer patients, you are not allowed to have care for your cancer. Any other population, but no, they are going to target trans kids and say, you cannot have any care, in spite of the fact that yet another study has shown out of Boston that giving care to trans kids improves their mental health and their general conditions across the board. It is criminal what they're going to do.
So, look, there are a lot of good people in Alabama. There's a group called Magic City Acceptance Center for LGBTQ youth, and they put up a billboard in Birmingham, which says, "Protect Alabama trans kids." And when kids are in the car and they pass by this, they're thrilled to see it, that somebody has their backs.
And I hope it educates others too. Meanwhile, in Florida last week, we were celebrating the fact that the Florida Senate had failed 5 times to pass a no trans athletes in school sports bill. Well, evidently 5 times was not enough, because the bill is being revived again, and they're going to try to add it to a charter schools bill. Note to the White House, let's add the Equality Act to a bill that is sure to pass.
I believe that they've backed off their genital inspection provision that was in there, and they're also taking elementary school kids out of the bill. So, I mean, look, that's very minor progress, but imagine, Governor DeSantis and that crowd being embarrassed about anything.
Yeah, President DeSantis, watch out.
In Kansas, the override of Governor Kelly's, Democratic governor's veto of a bill like this failed by 1 vote, so the bill does not go into effect.
But in West Virginia, Governor Jim Justice signed a no trans in sports bill. He went on MSNBC on Stephanie Rule's show, and she read him the riot act about this, about how, you cannot show me one instance of there being any problem with this. And that was great, because he was left speechless.
Well, he was a guy who, was considered doing pretty well on the COVID front in terms of vaccines and things like that. He sounded like a fairly reasonable person, but most of them are not even speaking to trans people or their parents or any of that.
And I would also like these TV people to not just say, you can't show me an instance of a problem. I would like them to say, the NCAA, the Olympics, everybody has studied this and is behind the idea of trans athletes competing on an equal basis. And they've set up guidelines, and it's all fine. And how dare you pass these laws?
And then in Tennessee, where the slate of hate continues, it's really 1 a week, maybe more than 1 a week. Governor Bill Lee signed a bill requiring parental notification if sexual orientation or gender identity is touched on in any way in school.
Does that include heterosexual sexual orientation?
Yeah, of course, and so much for teaching a course in constitutional law or history or pop culture. And they're passing a bill also that requires places that let trans people use restrooms to post warning signs. They just can't get enough of this stuff.
Yeah. And in South Carolina, I may have confused this with Florida. It's South Carolina that is trying for the 6th time to pass a no trans athletes bill. Florida may only be on its 2nd or 3rd try.
Well, in Florida, there were 3 trans people who allege abuse in 2020 in the Miami-Dade jail. They were arrested at Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and they wrote a letter to the mayor with a lawyer. The treatment that they got in there, show us your genitals, calling them it, hermaphrodite, all this kind of stuff went on. I'm not even going to read some of the language that was used against them. And so they're being backed up by TILDEF, Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, Southern Poverty Law Center, and the Harvard Law School for LGBTQ plus advocacy.
And in Massachusetts, in Northampton, lesbian hotbed, traditionally, the Trans Health Northampton is a new trans-led adult primary care facility, also offering treatment, pediatric treatment, mental health treatment, hormones. That is a step forward in care in the face of all these other places that are shutting it down.
One in the country.
Yeah.
In Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam has established an LGBTQ advisory board, and it's notable because this is the first time this has happened in the South.
Yeah, well, lots going on in Virginia. It's a real turnaround there. It shows what can happen in a southern state as the demographics change and as progressive leadership takes over.
And it should get better there when they do the redistricting, because now Democrats are going to be in control of it.
And on the other hand, we have the case in California of Caitlyn Jenner.
Oh.
I hesitate to even mention her because I think she's irrelevant to all of this, although she just put out a campaign ad that is so slick under the, mentorship of all the Trump crowd.
Pretending to be socially liberal.
Yeah.
Because what she came out against this week was trans girls in sports. And yet, a year ago, she gave an interview to Outsports where she totally affirmed trans people participating in sports and said how important it was. So she's a sleazebag, hideous. And of course, she's already being cited by right-wing Republicans across the country. Now, look, it's a crazy race.
People, yes, just general people saying, well, Caitlyn Jenner's against this, so what's the problem?
She's apparently going on Hannity tonight.
Well, speaking of sleazebags, our old pals, the Promise Keepers, are rearing their ugly heads again. They are planning to do an event at Cowboys Stadium in Dallas, Arlington, Texas, in mid-July, the 16th and 17th. That will be a relaunch of the Promise Keepers with an anti-LGBT agenda. So I don't know whether they're going to bring out 1,000 people or 40,000 people, but watch out for the Promise Keepers at Cowboys Stadium in mid-July.
Right. We told you about the fact that the city controller, Scott Stringer, was accused of 20 years ago of groping a woman on who he was dating against her will. And that's a complicated story, but State Senator Liz Krueger knows the woman and said she's credible, and added, maybe it's time for us to stop voting for men.
There are others now casting some doubt on the woman's story. It's very complicated. The New York mayor's race is a mess right now.
A lot of people running.
Yeah, none of them.
You get to vote for 5, folks. You get to vote for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's how it works.
The difficulty is in voting for even one.
Okay. Don't let other people decide who's going to be mayor, Ann. Use your votes.
I will definitely. Well, I will use at least some of them, but none of it is going to be with great enthusiasm, I have to say.
Let's give a little uplift here. We saw a wonderful short 8-minute film that PFLAG put out this week called A Place to Call Home, featuring first and second generation Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders parents about affirming their trans kids. It was made by Stephanie Tran, a self-identified queer Vietnamese filmmaker. We will link to the whole thing in our email, but let's just show you one clip from the movie.
We were marching with another API group, and we were like one of the last to march, and it was hot, and I was just really miserable. I said, you know what, I don't know if I can do this anymore. This is hot, this was like unorganized, and I don't want to be a part of it. This is going to be the last one. That's what I thought, right? So we're marching, I have my, I love my trans son sign, and this one girl was off to the side. She wasn't in a crowd. She wasn't with her friends or whatever. She was off to the side. And I looked at her, and she looked at me. It was like everything disappeared. And she bowed. And I bowed to her. And I thought, okay, I'm going to keep marching.
Wow.
Really amazing. Now, that was done in honor of Asian American, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month by PFLAG. If you go on their website, and we're going to put a link to the whole thing in the show note.
Yes, and if you want to be on our email list, go to gayusatv.org, and there's a place to sign up. You'll get an email from GoDaddy saying, you really want to do this? And you say yes, and you get our email every week with all these links.
And speaking of marches, as things are opening up here as COVID gets a little better, the Dyke March will reappear in person this year on Saturday night, June 26th. The Dyke March will be back in the street, and that'll be a great celebration. And of course, the Queer Liberation March will take place the next day. We're going to do it a little later this year to stay out of the way of other events and to give people time to show up. So we're going to gather at Bryant Park at 2:30, step off at 3, go downtown on 7th Avenue to Sheridan Square, and then Washington Square Park.
And we will be making personal appearances. But Chicago is having something called Pride in the Park in Grant Park. Everyone attending has to have proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test in the previous 72 hours. So that's one of the news aspects of this. That's going to be on June 26th and 27th, but it requires ticket access.
That's ridiculous. Well, that's
$87.55 or $231 for a 2-day VIP pass. Just march for your liberation. You don't need this.
This is why we have a Queer Liberation March,
Right.
because it's a community march that's open to all. No tickets, no regimented groups, no corporate floats, nothing. And we're working on having vaccination tents available at the beginning and end of the march, so people who aren't vaccinated can get vaccinated.
We're working on getting the kids at New Alternatives for Homeless Youth vaccinated, and it's difficult. So we welcome suggestions about if any of you have experience on what's working in that population. And we have a lot to march for because there's a lot of terrible things still going on. More transgender women.
Yeah, as we launch into that, I have to make a correction from last week and a really deep and sincere apology. We talked about Isaiah Brown, who was a gay man who'd been shot 10 times by the police in Spotsylvania, Virginia, in front of his home in a mistaken identity kind of thing where he was holding a phone and the police claimed he had a gun and he didn't, and terrible story. And I said that he had died of these shots, and the fact is he has not. He is in a coma. He is still in the hospital in critical condition, but he is very much alive, and we hope that he recovers. His family is with him and doing everything they can to help him recover. The doctors are continuing to operate on him, and I apologize very much for having mischaracterized that, and hope that he returns to health quickly.
Absolutely. Now we turn to Houston, where Iris Santos, 22, a trans woman, shot dead on April 23rd. She was sitting at a picnic table outside a restaurant when an unknown suspect opened fire, and she died in the hospital.
22 years old. And then in Boston, a terrible story, a woman named Jaharo Dialto, 42 years old, stabbed to death at home. She had taken in a family, husband, wife, child, and the husband or partner, I don't know if he and his partner were married, he came home and stabbed to death his wife or partner, and Jaharo. Jaharo was a ballroom legend in Boston, an advocate for the trans community, born originally in Lebanon. And this guy who's the alleged murderer, he killed them, fell asleep, woke up with a bloody knife in his hand, claimed PTSD, called the cops, and the net effect is 2 dead women.
Right. She, Dialto was a member of the House of Balenciaga, She was a House member who helped LGBTQ people without family support.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
In University Heights, Ohio, a gay couple's rainbow flag outside their home went missing. They assumed homophobia. They posted about it on social media. One neighbor offered to replace it and donate 10 more to neighbors. But the couple's dog found a raccoon that had stolen the flag. So, A, don't jump to conclusions, but now there are 11 pride flags flying in the neighborhood thanks to the raccoon.
Yeah, well, watch out for those raccoons. And also in Ohio, in Kings Mills, a lesbian couple at Kings High School were elected to the prom royalty positions. We would say prom king and queen, although they may have changed that language. Riley Loudermilk and Annie Wise there are the surprise winners of the prom king and queen positions. Congratulations.
They got a lot of support from peers and family, but afterwards some parents got unhinged about gender roles again, as they do.
Oh, please.
In Texas, a teen named Jace King became the first transgender Eagle Scout in the small town of Splendora. Scouts were banned, trans boys were banned until 2019. So Jace had to cram in the tasks to meet the requirements by the age of 18, 17 now. His mother stood up for him.
Yeah, that's cute. But not standing up for anybody is Representative Mark Sansel in Wellsville, Kansas. This is a crazy story. I mean, he claims he did all this on purpose to wake things up. But he went into a local high school as a substitute teacher and started throwing kids against the wall, talking about how the kids had to make more babies, follow God, talked about a kid wanting to commit suicide because he had lesbian parents. He was arrested and charged with assault.
Well, he pushed a student against the wall, hit his genitals, and invited other students to join in. And the students videotaped this.
And then he says he has no remorse for any of this. He did it on purpose. The students were in on it. This was about shaking things up and disrupting the group. I have no idea what he's talking about.
He was fired as a substitute, but his Republican colleagues in the legislature in Kansas have yet to comment, no less expel him. No, we got to get Mary Cheney.
They have to figure out what the hell he was doing. There's an interview with him online where he's very matter of fact about it, and he's just hanging out and saying, "Oh yes, this was all a put up job. I did it on purpose. I did it to disrupt. It's all fine." Right. Really? Okay.
Let's talk about a couple of people we lost this week. You all know Olympia Dukakis, Oscar winner for Moonstruck, but famous to us, of course, for playing trans character Anna Madrigal in 3 incarnations of Tales of the City, 1993, 98, and 2019. She was 89 and a very accomplished stage actress as well. She also played a lesbian character in the film Cloudburst in 2012, which with Brenda Fricker there. And she also was the PFLAG mom of a trans lesbian in the film version of Paul Rudnick's Jeffrey in 1995. She was a strong advocate for women's rights and LGBT rights, including same-sex marriage. She said, "I realize the real pulse of life is transformation. Yet I work in a world dominated by men and the things men value, where transformation is not the coinage, it's not even the language."
I think by the third time she played Mrs. Madrigal, it had become a little controversial that she was not a trans woman playing this part. So the evolution over the years is interesting.
What they did is they did a flashback and they hired a trans actress to play her when she was young in the last version.
Okay. Well, I guess that's something. And then Paul Kellogg. Paul Kellogg was an amazing leader of City Opera and of the Glimmerglass Opera and Festival. He died at 84. He was known for being extremely innovative in his productions and an out gay man. His partner, Raymond Hahn, a sculptor and painter, predeceased him in 2017. But in 2001, September 11th, when the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were hit with those terrorist planes, suddenly everything in New York was canceled. All shows, all performances, all sporting events, all life just suddenly came to a standstill. And the City Opera had been supposed to put on a production that night, which was canceled. But 4 days later, Paul Kellogg decided that the opera should perform. And so they did, and it was very controversial at the time, but they opened with this American flag, as you see in this picture, over the stage, and the whole company out on the stage singing, what did they sing? The
national anthem.
Yeah, the Star Spangled Banner. And it was a seminal event at the time. He was a very smart guy, and sorry to see him go.
International news?
A couple, just before we get there, your pal Kevin Spacey got a little reprieve. A judge in Manhattan said that his anonymous accuser, who was 14 at the time, he says Kevin Spacey sexually assaulted him, has to reveal his name in order for the suit to continue, because Kevin Spacey has a right to confront or investigate his accuser. We'll see whether the guy it's now, 30 years later, whether he comes forward. And in San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors has okayed the landmarking of the Phyllis Lyon Del Martin house without the designation of the adjoining empty lot. So the people who bought it can build a house on the empty lot, and to do anything to the Lyon Martin house, they need to get approval from the city.
Two great activists, really great.
And yes, international news.
Well, a terrible story out of Tonga. The leading LGBTQ activist there was found murdered on a beach. His name is Pali Kalepo Kafu, 41, known as Pali. He was president of the Tonga Lettuce Association, the LGBT group there, and a voice for LGBTQ rights throughout the Pacific region. And now the police have not, they arrested a 27-year-old man, surrendered to police, but they're not saying whether this was a hate crime yet. He led the Pacific Protection Gender Inclusion Network. Just a totally accomplished and very beloved activist, even though Tonga's laws are still pretty bad, but even the princess of Tonga publicly mourned him. And they're having a memorial service for him, which we'll put in our link here that you can watch online.
And in Latvia, a gay paramedic, Normans Kinzulis, 29 years old, who had often been harassed as an out gay man, was set on fire and killed. Horrible event.
His roommate was also injured in that attack by a neighbor who was homophobic, but just awful. In Honduras, we've told you about the case of the murder of a trans woman, Vicky Hernandez, 12 years ago, unsolved. Well, it's going before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. They're going to rule on whether it was an extrajudicial killing by the government. Hernandez was an activist for trans women and had been attacked before. The coup in Honduras in 2009 unleashed a lot of violence against trans people, 119 trans killings since then, mostly shot in the head. Her case was brought by the RFK Human Rights Group based in Washington and a group in Honduras. Look, 85% of the country is Catholic or evangelical. The government is trying to say, well, we're training people in sensitivity now. It's not going to happen again. Well, so we'll see. We hope for a good decision here.
The hope is that the court will order the government to protect trans people, although how we expect them to adhere to that is a question. In good news from France, the first lesbian march since 1971 How is that possible? Thousands of women showed up to march, inspired by dyke marches around the world, which we've now been doing for almost 30 years. One of their agenda items is fertility assistance for lesbian couples and single women. Of course, those who objected to this march accused them of being man-haters.
Well, some lesbian groups have emerged in recent years, including a new activist group called Yes, Yes, Yes.
In the Czech Republic, they're debating marriage equality, and the parliament there has passed both a marriage equality law and a ban on same-sex marriage as a first reading in the parliament. So now committees will study all of this. They currently allow registered partnerships with limited rights, but they're going to have to decide somewhere in the next few months which way they're going to go with this.
Well, the government of Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom promised to do all kinds of stuff about transgender rights, and they didn't. All they've done this week is the fee to apply for a gender recognition certificate has been slashed from £140 to £5, about $7. This, however, is all that they're doing. You still need to get medical diagnoses to change your gender.
Well, in Mexicali, Mexico, on the Baja California Peninsula, activists are filing complaints against the Catholic bishop for promoting an anti-LGBT mayoral candidate at Mass. You're not supposed to make political statements at Mass in Mexico.
Not supposed to do it here either, but they do.
On both sides here, I might add.
Canada, which we think of as so liberal, but the Canadian National Railway, CN, is withholding a pension from a gay widower over an outdated definition of a spouse. Ken Hare, who's
on the right in that picture,
lost his partner of 33 years, Jerry Schwartz, in 2012, but got no pension benefits, and that's how long he's been working on this, because the railroad didn't recognize same-sex relationships at the time of Schwartz's retirement. So Hare, 71, he spent 9 years fighting it. Schwartz worked for 30 years, retired in 1991. Hare had to sell their home and most of their belongings to survive. And
including their dogs.
I know, it's a terrible story. Come on, Canada.
The Canadian National Railway recognizes straight conjugal, meaning unmarried couples who've been together 1 year.
Huh.
These two were together for 33 years and recognized.
All right.
In Israel, we're celebrating Sapir Berman, 26 years old. She is a trans woman who officiated a Premier League soccer match. Good for her.
She's a top referee. She always saw herself as a girl in childhood. She's not the first in the world. That would be Lucy Clark, who came out in Britain in 2018. North Macedonia's representative at the Eurovision contest, Vasil, has come out publicly at 36. He's a former child star. He famously fled to the United States in the 90s with his family during the war with Kosovo, only to be sent back after 9/11 to his homeland. His anthem is "Here I Stand" in Rotterdam this month, and he'll be one of the first out celebrities in his country. We will link to his song in our email.
And back to Israel, the High Court of Justice says that trans parents can be listed as a parent on birth certificates of their children. This is after a trans man and his husband sued after a government entity automatically changed his designation on his child's birth certificate to female, although he is a trans man. That's supposedly cleared up now. AIDS news?
Well, we lost this week chemist and Gilead former CEO, John C. Martin, who has died at 69. He fell on the sidewalk, hit his head, and that was it. He was the man behind the development of Truvada as PrEP in 2012. But earlier, in 2006, with Atripla, combining Truvada with Bristol Myers Squibb's Sustiva into a single pill, replacing as many as 32 separate medications that people with HIV were taking daily. He also oversaw the creation of remdesivir in 2009 for Hep C. Now, he defended all these high drug prices, these astronomical prices, as subsidy for future research, a song we're hearing now with the COVID vaccines that we're not allowing into the world.
Look, genius discoveries, but he became a billionaire off these drugs, and that's just unnecessary. Let's put it that way, unnecessary. Meanwhile, in Scott County, Indiana, which opened up a needle exchange in 2015 over the dead body of Mike Pence, I say that figuratively, of course, because they were having a huge HIV outbreak because of people who were intravenous drug users. Now they may close that exchange, thereby leading to more death in Scott County, Indiana. And congratulations to Sarah Schulman, whose new book about ACT UP, Let the Record Show, got a brilliant review in the New York Times today and elsewhere, and will be on this show in 3 weeks.
May 26th, we're taping. Entertainment news, comedian Hannah Gadsby revealed on Instagram that she married Jenny Shamash, a producer, back in January. She's
a producer on her Douglas show. They look pretty happy.
Well, I could say, well, we're down to our last minute and a half, but congratulations to her.
And congratulations to Brianna Stewart, WNBA basketball star, who proposed to her girlfriend, Marta Chargay, a Spanish basketball player. They're there in Phoenix. Now, if that doesn't look like a lesbian proposal, I don't know what does.
Okay. Broadway is expected to open in September. They're selling tickets pretty soon. Everything's supposed to be opening up in New York on May 19th. I don't know.
May 14th, stay at home. Watch Netflix, the Halston series starting on the 14th with Ewan McGregor as Halston. The trailer looks a little cheesy.
Now, the final season of Pose bows on FX this weekend.
No, it's already started.
But did we do the story about at the opening how the executive producer Janet Mock gave a 15-minute speech slamming the co-producers? I want to get paid more. Why am I making $40,000 an episode, huh? Do you know who the F I am? It was quite a scene.
Okay. Probably not quite as volatile will be Anderson Cooper and Chris Cooper appearing together online on the 19th at 6:30 p.m. for the Audubon Society. And congrats to Chris, who had a review in the New York Times book review last weekend, before that, about a bird book. New York City, NYCAudubon.org for tickets.